Welcome to the Purpose-Focused Advisor, a podcast for financial planners, advisors, and RIAs looking to get the most out of yourself and your business. Join Rob Brown as he walks you through a journey that will allow you to take action in your business and your life so you can be the best that you can possibly be. Now here's your host, Rob.
Yes, you have it right. It is time once again for the Purpose-Focused Advisor. Rob Brown, your host here, and I'm excited to have with me Nick Wolverton, who is the owner of Peak Financial Management. Nick's been in the industry since 2015 and took over ownership of Peak Financial back in 2020, right before we got COVID going. So I bet you there's some stories there. Nick, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Rob. I really appreciate it. Glad to be here.
So, Nick, my favorite way to start a podcast called the Purpose-Focused Advisor is to ask you why you're doing what you do. What got you into this business and what keeps you moving forward in a purposeful way?
Yeah. So for me, that began a few years before 2015 when I entered the financial services industry. I was a fundraiser for Wycliffe Bible Translators, a missions organization that does Bible translation and other literacy and community development work all around the world in minority languages. I was out visiting donors all across the Western U.S., something like 13 states at one point I covered. I always joke, though, that they were the states that it was at least 2 hours driving to find more than a couple hundred people. So, those kinds of states. But as I was doing that, I kept running into this problem. And the main problem I ran into was the people on the other side of the table from me saw me as wanting something from them. And while on one hand, that's true, right?
Sure.
I was fundraising for a ministry, for a missions organization about which I was deeply passionate. At the end of the day, that was not my singular focus. What I wanted for them was the joy that comes from generosity. That's been my personal experience, is that giving is one of the most enjoyable things I have the privilege of doing with the resources I've been entrusted. But beyond that, I started realizing that they felt like I wanted something from them. It was almost the check for your keys and wallet before he leaves and make sure he doesn't take them, It felt like I was getting the look that used car salesmen get sometimes. And I totally understood where they were coming from. I don't fault them for that. There's been a lot of misuse of those kinds of roles to guilt people or shame people into giving. And that wasn't what I was there for, but it's hard to make those distinctions. And so as time wore on, I started to realize there might be a better way to get to have those kinds of conversations. And so a good friend of mine I live in Colorado near Denver, but one of my best friends at the time lived in Montrose on the west side of the state. And he said to me one day, he said, "Nick, if you want to be able to talk to people about their giving, become an advisor, do what I do, because we get to sit on the same side of the table and we get to talk to them about these things. That barrier is removed because that's your job, is actually to talk to them about their money and the decisions they make with it." And so that was the specific, but even broader than that, I realized as a fundraiser, as much as I enjoyed the work and the relationships I had were incredible. I met some of the most wonderful people, most generous people, selfless, just salt of the earth type folks. I realized that I wanted to have a practical skill that I could use to serve others. Fundraising is really about communications, which is a skill in itself, no question. But it was mostly a communications relationship sort of role. And I wanted something a little more concrete that I could offer to people to serve their real felt needs. And financial planning just scratched that itch. It felt like, yes, I can absolutely do that. And it marries really well with this relational, communication-oriented sort of background that I already had.
Yeah, that's great. I love the way that you viewed that transition from fundraising into being a financial planner, a financial advisor, because it is a natural transition. And at their heart, in both cases, you're really trying to help people understand what they want and why they want what they want, and then how they can use it or share it or give it. So you get to learn a lot about the people that you are talking to, whether you're fundraising or you're digging into a financial plan.
That's exactly right. I think that in order to do either of those roles well, you have to really be in tune with what matters most deeply to the person sitting across from you.
Yeah, it reminds me in the coaching work that I do. Oftentimes, I'll have somebody come to me and say, "Rob, teach me Brian Tracy's 21 closing questions." And I'm like, well, I know some of them. I read that book or listened to those cassette tapes way back when. But usually, what works best is teaching them how to ask what I call the single biggest question, which can have two versions. It's what is really most important to you, or the other version is what's the biggest challenge you're facing right now as it relates to whatever that topic is you're talking to. And then after they give you the first pass at that answer, which usually is kind of a surface level answer, you say, tell me more. Why did you say that? Yeah. Let me repeat what you said. And you dig in, and then you really find the meaning behind what they really want or what they're really trying to overcome. So I imagine that is what you see in your financial planning business, but also what you saw in the giving business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's exactly right. And it's interesting you say, our ability to understand our own deepest felt needs as well as deepest desires is iterative, right? Like it takes repetition to drill down to what the core of that really is. And in some ways, you think about a financial advice relationship or fundraising like I was doing before. I don't have the advantage of going to church with somebody every Sunday morning in most cases, or, passing them at work. These are people that I might see a handful of times over the course of a year. And in order to build that trust, it does take time. And so being okay with the iterative nature of that, I think it's just interesting how that overlays onto financial advice, not feeling like you have to grasp it immediately out of the gates. You have to let that trust build, and you have to be open to the fact that there's aspects about this person sitting across from you that are ever changing, and you will always need to work to understand what matters to them, just as honestly, they have to work at understanding what matters to them too. All of us, it's, if we're not doing that self-reflection, contemplation to understand what's in our hearts, it's easy to miss it for ourselves even.
So which do you think is harder? You understanding what they want, or your clients understanding what they want?
I'm going to answer, I actually think it is clients understanding what they want, but I'm answering that because I know that to be true for myself. When I think about what I want, that's a harder question for me to answer than it is for me to sit on the outside and observe. Let's say a couple are sitting in our office and discussing something they think they would like to do. A lot of times the undercurrents or the unspoken things, I think, are more obvious to those who are watching. But when it's you who's communicating those things, I'm a verbal processor personally. So a lot of times I don't know what I think until I've said it. And I find that to be true for a lot of our clients. You sit there and you watch them process it, and suddenly you see that light bulb come on. But as the one who's been observing, you can kind of see where it's going, but you're getting to join them in the process of realizing what it is that they really feel or think about something.
Yeah, that's great. And I'm glad we took some time to kind of dig into that a little bit, because it's really easy as a financial professional to take that iterative nature of really getting to know someone to heart. Because I guess, I don't know, we've all been in a situation where we think, well, maybe this is love at first sight. And so we've got it all wrapped up. And in truth, maybe there was love at first sight, but we had to develop that love. We couldn't just kind of leave it where it started.
Yeah. And I think one of the challenges for us as professionals who give advice in relationships is not to assume once we understand where someone's heart and desires are at one day, that that's where they're always going to be. We have to keep working at understanding them, because I want permission to change. I know that my my life is constantly changing, and our clients need us to be able to approach them with that same mindset. But it's hard.
Right.
It's a lot easier if I can just say, clients Bob and Sue are this, right? And that's what I get to target for the rest of my working years with them. But the reality is they're people who are changing and their thoughts are evolving and all those things. And we need to be able to follow them on that journey.
Yeah. So let's dig into how you do that, because you are a biblically focused planner. So you're bringing your faith into your client relationships. And for those who may not understand how that works, it might sound like, well, gosh, what do? Beat them over the head with one of those Bibles that you used to raise money for and say, well, in addition to doing financial planning, I want to, convert you, which I'm sorry to joke about something so important, but kind of explain how that works, because there are some listeners to this podcast who have similar views and ways of going about things, I'm sure that you do, but others who think, well, how do you put that thing that's so important to you personally into a relationship with a client?
Yeah, I will just start with saying I don't have a formula. I don't think there's just a do X, Y, and Z and you'll have accomplished that, or you'll have meetings that are run like that. The person sitting across from me in every meeting is a different person. And trying to meet them where they're at and bring them both advice and just kind of life counsel, personal guidance that will meet them in that place requires being responsive to where they're at. And as a Christian, I would say, being responsive to what I sense God telling me they need to hear or be directed toward. And that's true for our clients who share our Christian worldview, as well as for our clients who do not. I feel deeply called to love and serve both of those groups. And so, for us, one of the ways it began was just asking people at the end of every single meeting, how can I pray for you? And that's regardless, again, of where their worldview is at. It just opens up the conversation to say, hey, there's a whole aspect of who we are as advisors that is deeply important to us. We're not trying to shove it down your throat, but it's an aspect of how we really truly care for the people that we love. We talk to the creator of the universe about them. We tell God our concerns, the things they carry, and we join them in that. So just offering to pray for people, that's something the founder of Peak Financial started, I don't even know, 15, 20 years ago probably, and we still do it in every single meeting. We ask people, how can we pray for you? I think it can obviously go past that, but that was the starting point for us. And it actually has proven out to be not just a starting point, but something we continue to do. And I think it's been really fruitful and beneficial. And it's interesting because even for our clients who I think would say, I don't really care about this Christian Jesus Bible stuff. I'm not into that. I don't find too many of our clients who are put off by us asking how we can pray for them, because I think generally speaking, people feel cared for by that question. Right. And even if they, don't necessarily understand what it's about for us, they feel cared for by it.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm really glad you said that. In fact, I was just doing some training at my church where the pastor was trying to help people understand how they could serve other members of the church as leaders in the church. And he said, well, just ask them how you can pray for them. And it's a great question to connect with people. And even if they don't have anything, a lot of times people, when you ask that question, think, well, there's something of needy that they might want you to pray for, something bad going on in their life. You could be praying for something that's good going on in their life, to be a prayer
Absolutely.
of gratitude.
Yeah. And it's interesting because a lot of our clients will just say, I don't have anything to pray for. Things are really good. And it's like, great. Well, thank God for that with you. It doesn't have to be, I have this deep need in my life. You're right. We can celebrate the good and also enter into the hard with people for sure.
Yeah. And you talked about the iterative name, or the iterative way of getting to really know people deeply, and having a question like that is intentionally built into your process, even though you're not doing it necessarily because it's part of your process. It has become part of a process that helps you iteratively get to know your clients better and better. And then when they need to come back and see you, they're looking forward to it because they're coming to see someone who really cares about
Yes.
them. And there isn't an advisor on the planet who wouldn't be better served by having clients who really are looking forward to coming
That's
back
right.
and seeing them and having that ongoing conversation.
That's exactly right. I think, all of us, our deep desire is to be seen and to be heard. And as financial advisors, we have an incredible opportunity to ask good questions and to listen deeply and really engage with what's going on in someone's life. Even if we don't have a solution to it, or it doesn't even fall under the umbrella of financial advice, we get to let people feel heard and known by someone who deeply cares about them. I think it reflects the heart of God. And I just know, I think our clients feel really loved by that in the way that we serve them.
Yeah, no, that's awesome, and I like that. And as we were getting ready for this podcast, I mentioned to you that I just spent 4 days in prison, not literally, but I was in the prison, but I didn't spend the night doing a ministry, and that's exactly what happens during that ministry. The guys ask you why you're there, and you say, "I'm here to listen to you and to love you." And God will work out the rest. And I'm not trying to beat you up with the Bible to convert you. Whatever's going to happen, God's going to do it. I'm just the tool. And that to me is a great way to go about life, whether you're taking it from the Christian perspective or you're a financial advisor who really cares about the individual successes of your clients. You want them to know that layer of connection is there. It's not about you as the advisor proving that you scored the highest on the CFP exam, or you know way more than they do. It's about taking those things that you've learned and under the surface having them be the tools, the instruments to help uncover what somebody wants, so that you can then offer them what they need to move forward.
Yeah. We will often talk about it around our office as technical competence is a minimum requirement, right? Like I can't show up and do my job if I don't know the technical aspects of my job. But oftentimes we feel deep conviction around the fact that that's not actually the thing that clients are most often desiring. You have to have that as a minimum. But beyond that, we would say, like, whether it be biblical faithfulness or just relational sincerity or authenticity, those are the things that actually end up helping us to serve clients well, because you could have the most technically sound, sophisticated, advantageous plan for somebody, but if you haven't built the relationship, if they don't feel cared for by you, the likelihood of being able to actually implement that plan, especially if there's places where they don't understand something because it's so sophisticated, it's probably not going to happen. I don't think you'll be able to implement it with the success you could if you have that relational depth and that sense, they care for me, they're in my corner.
Yeah. So important. We use the word client experience or client communication or client service, and those are great, simple words for describing something that is much deeper if you're truly trying to develop those long-term relationships. So let's shift gears. So you started out in the business. You in 2015, you worked for a handful of years with the founder of Peak, and now you're the owner. Talk about that transition, and certainly feel free to relate any questions, since the timing related to COVID was interesting, to say the least. But so many advisors who listen to this podcast are thinking about their own succession plans or are looking for succession acquisition opportunities. They want to move from being, an advisor to being a business owner. Talk a little bit about that progression.
Yeah. So I was actually hired by my predecessor who founded Peak. Her name's Barty. Barty hired me. To her credit, I think she had so much vision for what she wanted Peak to become. And as a result, when she hired me, I had a Spanish degree. I had no financial service experience, but she saw my work as a fundraiser relating to a lot of high value donors, people who gave a lot to support the work of Bible translation, as checking some boxes on the side of things she couldn't train someone in. And so she was willing to step outside of the usual lanes that we look for. But she also had to do that far enough in advance that when she was ready to retire, her successor had been trained. And so she hired me in 2015. I had started earlier that year just working on my Series 65 license, just so that I'd have some preparation in place. And then she hired me. I started in September, basically immediately started working on my CFP, so that I could have that set of knowledge to be able to technically enter into the space with clients. But in addition to that, Barty immediately put me in meetings with clients as her second. And you could say that's super inefficient, right? 2 people to do the job that maybe 1 person could do. We still do that today. And we don't even have someone who's in training per se. We have 2 advisors. We have 1 other team member. There's almost always 2 people in every meeting. We find there's a ton of benefit from that. But Barty brought me in early. That allowed me to start developing a lot of rapport with clients. But it also was that hands-on front row sort of observation training that you can only get in client meetings. So I think she had a ton of foresight to do that. She knew that retirement was probably coming for her, but she hadn't really decided when that would be. She just knew she needed to prepare somebody. We joke that monkeys can do the math that we do today, right? Like it's not actually math proficiency that makes for a good financial planner these days. There's all sorts of tools to help us do what we do. The ability to deliver that advice, that information, and help it connect in a way that makes sense to clients, that will be actionable. All of those soft skills are the far harder to learn. I'm still learning them. I don't presume to be, highly proficient in those areas. I hope I'm getting better with each day that passes, every meeting that I have. So that was kind of how it began. But the other thing I'll say is that when Barty hired me, she knew I was not the succession plan that would be able to come with a big down payment and quickly buy her out. So in reality, her hiring me had a lot to it that was actually an act of generosity on her part. She brought me in and gave me the opportunity to be a successor when I really never would have been qualified to do so. And that was an incredible gift to me. So with that being said, we worked together. I was mentored by her for all of those, just a little under 5 years. And that was an incredible opportunity to get me up to speed very quickly. It also helped make the transition to me as the lead advisor for clients she'd been serving for many cases 15, 20 years, really seamless and really easy. I don't think we lost a single client because of that transition when it happened. They'd been a long time prepared for that coming. The last thing I'll add, you alluded to earlier. So when the pandemic hit, I had been the owner for 2.5 months. I was attending the Kingdom Advisors Conference in Orlando when all this news started breaking about the pandemic. And I just remember sitting in a conference hall with a bunch of people looking at their phones, and they're all kind of reacting to something. And everybody's just kind of like, this will blow over. No big deal. Yeah. Obviously, we didn't really know what was coming. The thing that was incredible about this transition, though, Barty was in my corner. I was in her corner. When it came to negotiations, we were always advocating for each other's best interest. That takes a high level of trust. That does not happen from the day that you hire somebody. But if you can get to that place from a negotiating and transition perspective, it can make it, honestly, not just easy, it was joyful. It was a fun process, becoming the owner and her retiring, because she also gradually retired. She didn't just jump off the retirement cliff and hope that the landing would go well. She cut a day here. She cut 2 days. She got to the point where she was working 2.5, 3 days a week. So she got to ease into retirement and figure out what that was going to look like. But she also stayed very engaged with me. We talked probably 2, 3, sometimes 4 times a week, especially during the COVID crash that was going on. And she didn't say this to me until well after the fact. But I want to say it would have been in May or June of 2020, after we'd already had a pretty big rebound. She said, Nick, I didn't have the heart to tell you this at the time, but I was so glad it was you and not me going through that crash. She's like, I don't think I had another one of those in me. But she said that joking, but she was such a resource to me, even specifically like, hey, this client's reacting this way. What do you think I should do? She had years more insight into that client than I did. And so she coached me and guided me through that process. And I'm not sure how it would have looked a lot different if I hadn't had her on my shoulder taking care of me through that time.
Yeah. I'm really glad you took the time to walk through that, because that transition, as we were talking about with getting to know clients, was an iterative process too.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't, I'm going to hire Nick, and 5 years from now, he's going to buy the practice from me. There were a lot of steps along the way. And, in the world that we live in now, it is because we hear, or advisors hear, about these big deals that are done with private equity that are taking them out at multiples that are, maybe once in a generation sort of levels. They think, well, that's the only way to do transition and succession. Right. Or they have, too many have this idea that you can wait until like 6 months before you want to retire to decide, who's going to take over your practice, and you'll quickly get somebody to buy it from the outside or step in from the inside. And nothing could be further from the truth. But that internal, slowly developed succession plan, developing that trust, developing those client relationships, can work beautifully, because I'm sure Barty did okay on the way out financially. But it was done in a way that really preserved what sounds to me like the culture that she had built inside of the organization. So she wasn't disrupting the culture. And so there's so much to learn from thinking about it that way. In fact, I was just talking to an advisor last week or a couple of weeks ago. I had lunch with him, and I was surprised to learn that he had sold his practice. It wasn't somebody that I was working with. It was just a local advisor, and it was fun talking to him about that, because I hadn't met with him in about 18 months. But something that he said in one of in that last conversation propelled him to start thinking, I am not getting as much joy out of doing what I do, and I've started this other business, which is taking more and more time. How do I work my way into a good succession? And what he did was reached out to somebody that he knew really well, that was looking to grow and expand. They shared similar values, and they just agreed on a way to do it and make it happen more quickly. But it had the same elements as you just described, because there was that depth of knowledge, and there was this understanding that we need to do this not just as a financial transaction, but as a transaction or transition that will benefit clients and will be something that both the seller and the buyer can say, hey, I feel really good about where I am.
Yeah. I think that's crucial for sure.
Yeah, it's always an interesting place to be. So it looks like you were getting ready to add something.
Yeah, Rob, I'm curious. I mean, you sit in the seat of seeing, I imagine, a lot of these transitions happen. If you could bucket them, how many land in this, like, it went really well, all parties were happy? And how many land in the, that could have been a lot better, and, I wish we had it to do over again? And what drives that? I'm curious from your perspective.
Yeah. So I've seen lots of partnerships come together, and usually the early indicator that something isn't going to work is that the two partners rush into working together too quickly. They don't have any kind of incubation period where they really get to know each other and how their businesses work and how they might complement each other. So if they can't get that right, get that foundation right, then everything else tends to not work later. And I've seen more not work than work. In fact, I'm working with a client right now who has a great practice, found a great partner, worked it out the right way, including building a breakup clause into their agreement.
Yep.
Because 6 months in, it was obvious that they had missed something really big in their conversation that neither one of them understood, but they both came to realize that their expectations of each other were unrealistic. And so fortunately, because we had the breakup clause in there, we were able to kind of work them out of that, and each of them could go back onto their businesses the way that they were. But I think, and I love this question. I like being kind of challenged with trying to come up with that core thing, because I do it all the time, but I'm usually doing it in individual situations, not trying to bunch them all together.
Yeah.
But it's really getting to know the person and making sure that each one knows what the other one really wants, why they're really doing this.
Yeah.
I was talking to a client on Monday, and we're getting ready to invite a new partner into their practice. It's a husband and wife team that own this practice, and this will be their first outside partner. And it's been amazing having conversations where the thought is it's going to be a gradual transition to bring this partner in, allow that new person to acquire a piece of the firm every year for a number of years until the couple is ready to retire. But neither the husband nor the wife in this partnership had ever thought, well, what if we just sold it now? Multiples are high. What if we just sold it now? And they're not going to change their mind. That's not what they're going to do. But to ask that question so they could dig deep into what they really wanted from their business and from a partnership, to be able to carry on with what they've built so successfully.
It's interesting. In some ways, it feels like it mirrors the financial service side of things, where we could get so focused on the technical, get so focused on doing the best practice, right? I'm going to get all the right pieces in place. If you lose the relational, it doesn't really matter if all the technical was right.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. And sometimes when somebody asks me what I do, I say I'm an advisor to advisors, because that's really at the heart of it. Those that I advise, I'm advising on something different than a financial advisor might be doing who's working with individual clients. So we're getting ready to wrap this up, Nick, but I've got to ask you, what challenges are you facing right now? So when you think about the next level of growth or success for Peak Financial, what challenges do you run into?
I think one of our biggest challenges relates to deciding when to expand as a team. So we're a team of 3 right now. We have an intern with us from the local university 1 day a week. And the reality is we really like being a small team. I think when you look at all the different KITSE's metrics and benchmarks for highly efficient, highly effective teams, we check out on all of those. And yet we also really feel passionate about the mission we have. And so we want to expand and offer to more people the services that we provide. Honestly, we could stop growing right now if we didn't want that aspect of it and be perfectly content and have all of our needs met. But we feel passionate about offering it to more people. And that is going to require our team to change and grow with time. And managing the culture change that comes with that, the relational dynamics that change because of that, I really want to do all of that well. And yet some of it is just, it's kind of like, again, like our financial advice. We can't predict the future. So what's the next best decision to make? And I think we're in that space. So that is a challenge that's on my mind frequently. I wish I could say I had answers to it. I have thoughts on it. I have ideas that come to mind and inputs I get from other advisors and friends and whatnot. But I think it's definitely I won't know the next step until we get to the one ahead of us. We just got to take them one at a time is how it's feeling today. But that is something I think about.
Yeah, that's something that I've worked on with a number of clients. And a little quick advice is,
yeah, please
don't let the supposition that you have that small is the thing that has created the culture that you have. There's nothing that you do in a small way with a small team that you can't do in a bigger way with a bigger team, because the culture and doing the things that you want to do to serve your clients are scalable, but it has to be intentional. In fact, if I think it's my word of the year, I didn't pick a word at the beginning of the year, but if I look back over the course of this past year, I say the number one word I've used is intentional, because I see advisors too often being unintentional, being accidental about how they do things, and accidents lead to more accidents. It's like a pile up. You slam your foot on the brakes, but you still run into that car in front of you, and all of a sudden 5 cars pile up behind you. But when you're intentional, you leave the distance between the cars. To thread my analogy, you don't run into that car in front of you, and you successfully make your way through the traffic light. So anyway, just some quick thought there, because I think that's a challenge that a lot of advisors face, and it's also okay to stay small. There's nothing wrong with that, because that's the other thing I think sometimes that advisors get wrong is they think, well, I've got to grow this business. It's a requirement that I go from 3 people to 30 people. It's not. There are so many great advisors out there who have small teams, serve lots of people, do really good work, and they just stay that way. And it's an intentional decision.
Yeah, that's good. I think we probably land in that we want to stay smaller, but that doesn't mean we have to be tiny. So I appreciate that. Thank you for that guidance, that encouragement.
Yeah, sure. Now, it sounds like you've got something great to build on. I've really enjoyed getting to know you. So as we land the plane, tell me the best way for people to get to know you and get in touch with you and learn about the things that you're doing.
Sure. You can look us up online at Peak Financial Management. It's all spelled out.com. Or if you ever want to talk to me, I'm happy to chat with anybody. Our phone number is all on the website there. As an email address, you can reach out to us through the website. It's by far the easiest way to find us.
Awesome. Thanks for that. That's one of the things I love about this industry, and especially the people that I meet on this podcast. We all want to help each other, because at our core, as advisors or advisors to advisors, it's all about how do we serve people in a way that we're intended to serve them. And sometimes it's our peers. So awesome. So let's wrap it up here. I want to say thank you to our audience for listening in. I will see you next week. And of course, remember, we're rooting for your success. Take care.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of The Purpose-Focused Advisor. If you want to learn more, head over to our website, truestfancoaching.com. There you'll learn all about becoming a purpose-focused advisor. You'll also find today's show notes and links to the other gifts and resources we talked about during the episode. Again, thanks for listening, and remember, we're rooting for your success.